When the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, Jabir ibn Abdullah, radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was one of the most famous of the Ansar, was a very young man. And he would go on to be one of the most instrumental people in Islam. The Hajj of the Prophet ﷺ is narrated primarily by Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu. There are so many narrations, there is so much closeness that Jabir radiallahu anhu would enjoy with the Prophet ﷺ throughout his entire life in Medina. But it starts with his father, and what's very interesting about his father is what we know about his father basically pertains to his death. His father Abdullah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who embraced Islam, dedicated himself immediately to the Prophet ﷺ. And he had Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu and then 9 daughters. So he has Jabir and he has 9 daughters. And because of that, he didn't want Jabir radiallahu anhu to fight with him in Badr or in Uhud, because he wanted Jabir to take care of his 9 sisters in case something happens to him. So on top of Jabir being young, his father asks him to stay back, and instead he can serve in another capacity, but he doesn't want him to go forth and actually participate in the battle in case something happens to him. So Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu was serving the thirsty soldiers, he was doing what he could, but at the same time, he wasn't fighting in the battle because his father directly told him not to. Now, before Uhud starts, Jabir radiallahu anhu narrates this heart-to-heart conversation between him and his father. Abdullah tells him, waking up on the morning of Uhud, he says, "Listen, my son, I had a dream last night, and the way I interpreted that dream is that I'm not going to make it past this battle. That, inshallah, I'm going to be blessed with martyrdom. I'm going to be blessed with shahada on this day of Uhud." So he gives him this wasiyah, this will on how to take care of his sisters, the 9 daughters he's going to leave behind, as well as some of the debts. He had a lot of debt and he had 9 daughters. So it's going to be difficult on Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And his father is telling him, listen, this is what I want you to do after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants me martyrdom, because that's what I saw in this dream, and that's what I think is going to happen on the day of Uhud. SubhanAllah, what ends up happening, Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu mentions that my father was amongst the first that were killed on the day of Uhud, and Jabir was there, but he wasn't allowed to fight. So he then describes the next part of this. He says, "Ji'a bi abi ila Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa qad muthila bihi." They brought the body of my father to the Prophet ﷺ. وَقَدْ مُثِّلَ بِهِ means that he was crucified, basically. He was mutilated. He was not simply killed, but his father was basically cut into different pieces. وَوُضِعَ بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. So he's put in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and he had a cover on him, and the Prophet ﷺ was keeping him covered. So he says, ذَهَبْتُ أَكْشِفُ عَنْ وَجْهِهِ, that I went to uncover his face. It's very powerful, and human narration. I want to see my dad's face. And he says, فَنَهَانِي قَوْمِي, then everyone held my hand and said, don't do it, right? They knew what would happen if I saw what was done to my father. And so the women of my family, his sisters and, the widow of Abdullah, they started to cry loudly. So they started to wail loudly. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لَا تَبْكِي مَا زَارَتِ الْمَلَائِكَةُ تُظِلُّهُ بِأَجْنِحَتِهَا. He said, don't cry, because I see that until now, the angels have not left Abdullah with their wings. They're still following him and they're shading him with their wings. SubhanAllah, what an honor for him. So the Prophet ﷺ is seeing the way the malaika are following this procession, even though he has just been killed. They're still keeping their wings over him. Now, Jabir radiallahu ta'ala anhu says, that obviously this was difficult on the whole family. To lose him. They knew that he was blessed. They knew that he had the bushra. They knew that he was, given the glad tidings and martyred. But at the same time, it hurt them, right? To be missing such an important figure in their family. So he says, the Prophet ﷺ came up to me and he said, Ya Jabir, ma li araka munkasiran. SubhanAllah, it's so beautiful. The Prophet ﷺ even recognizes, Ya Jabir, why do I see you broken? Munkasiran, like you're broken. And he says, Ya Rasulullah, my father has been martyred and he left behind, a lot of daughters and a lot of debts. So it's overwhelming. So the Prophet ﷺ said, should I not tell you what happened to your father after he passed away? So I said, Bala ya Rasulullah, yes, O Messenger of Allah. So we already know the angels were following him around with their wings and shading him throughout that entire process. The Prophet ﷺ says, ما كلم الله أحدا قط إلا من وراء حجاب وكلم أباك كفاحا. This is so beautiful. He said, Allah never spoke to anyone except from behind a veil, but he spoke to your father directly. SubhanAllah, like that's a huge ni'mah, huge blessing, right? That's something that is beyond what anyone could expect. Like Allah spoke to your father directly rather than from behind a veil. And what did he say to him? He said, Ya Abdi, tamanna alayya. Oh my servant, ask me anything, Ya Abdullah, and I'll give it to you. So this is a conversation that the Prophet ﷺ is relating to Jabir about a conversation between Allah and his father. So he said, Ya Rab, he said, oh my Lord, tuhyini fa'uqtalu fika thaniya. Oh my Lord, my wish is that you send me back to the dunya and I'll be killed in your cause again. SubhanAllah, give me life again, Ya Allah, and let me be martyred for your sake again. Why? Because, you know, the martyr wants to come back, not because the martyr is not enjoying what they have, but SubhanAllah, when they see what Allah is giving them, and giving your life for Allah means nothing at that point, right? I mean, it's compared to what Allah is giving to you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded and he said, إِنَّهُ سَبَقَ مِنِّي أَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهَا لَا يَرْجِعُونَ. I have already decreed that the people will not return back to it. Meaning, you're not going to go back to the dunya. And he said, Ya Rab, فَأَبْلِغْ مَنْ وَرَائِي. He said, oh my Lord, then convey the news of what is happening with me to those that I left behind. Tell my family what happened with me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Do not say of those who have been killed in the way of Allah that they are dead. Rather, they are with their Lord being sustained.